welcome to today's webinar. My name is Deb Pingle and I'm the Agent Coordinator at the Crouse Agency. Today's webinar is Introduction to Medicaid Planning. If you have questions, please type those into the question portion of your GoToWebinar toolbar. We will try to answer as many questions at the end of today's webinar. Otherwise, look out for an email from myself or Connie later this week. Just a reminder that we will be posting a recording of this webinar along with our slides to our website within 24 hours. There will be a brief survey at the end of the webinar. If you could take a moment to answer a few questions, it is very helpful to us. And now I would like to introduce to you Thomas Crouse, Vice President of Operations. Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Deb. I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate everyone being here today. So there's another installment of our Crouse Agency E-Academy. Today we're discussing an introduction to Medicaid planning. This course was really designed for those just starting out and people who want a refresher. So just want to talk a little bit about the Crouse Agency. It's a company that we developed off of Crouse Financial Services to service the unique needs of our insurance agents. We work with a number of agents, approximately 400 year to date, that we service all throughout the country. We provide products and services similar to Crouse Financial Services, which you're all familiar with, but we do it under the agency umbrella. So like I said before, the goal of today's presentation is to discuss Medicaid planning generally, to go over some of the basics, and I want to cover some of the most frequent types of planning cases that we see for both the individual and a married couple. So I'm really looking for the beginners, and if we have some more advanced planners on today, I guess you can use this as a refresher course for some of the basic ideas and planning techniques. So we all know, we've all heard about the aging demographics, the baby boomers. Aging demographics and baby boomers. We have people turning 65 every single day, so approximately 10,000 baby boomers. And this is going to continue through 2030. And the statistics are there that 70% of these individuals will require some type of long-term care in their future. So a lot of financial advisors we have on, they're really familiar with wealth planning, where you're trying to grow an individual's assets over time. And then we transition them into retirement planning, where you're trying to make those assets last through the retirement. But what do you do when you have a client that comes to you that now requires long-term care, whether it be in an assisted living facility? But what we're really concerned about is a nursing home. So when somebody transitions into a nursing home, those costs are exponential. They can wipe out even the best plan very quickly, and we're going to kind of walk you through some of that information. So generally, who pays for long-term care in America? Well, there's personal savings. Typically only very wealthy individuals can afford to pay out at the rate of a nursing home, which, as you'll see, it's very expensive on a monthly basis. We have Medicare. A lot of people mistakenly believe that Medicare covers nursing home stays for a long term, but that's simply not true. Typically, Medicare will only pay up to 100 days of a skilled nursing home stay, and that's typically in a skilled care facility setting. So if somebody were to break their hip and then need care, Medicare will cover them for those treatments as long as they keep improving. But once they stop improving, then they're going to be off of Medicare, and they have to either privately pay or come up with some other option. Then you have long-term care insurance. And typically what we see here is people, by the time they realize they truly need long-term care insurance, it's simply too late. They either can't get underwritten for a policy, and they don't plan out well enough, and they miss their opportunity to take advantage of a long-term care insurance policy, even though it is the best way to protect yourself against a nursing home stay in your future. In addition, a lot of long-term care insurance companies have gotten out of the industry, so it's a very small pool of insurance companies even willing to underwrite that risk. So finally, that brings us to Medicaid, and as you'll see, Medicaid is the primary payer of long-term care expenses in America by paying 62.2%. So what exactly is Medicaid? Well, Medicaid is a state and federal joint program that covers a lot of long-term care expenses in the United States. It also covers, I guess in a nursing home setting, it covers room and board, pharmacy and incidentals. It covers all gaps in Medicare supplemental insurance plan. So it's a federally funded program where the federal government provides X amount of funds to the state. The state has to adopt the federal rule system, which we'll discuss a little bit more in depth. So for the state to receive those federal funds, they must have a level playing field and adopt the federal rule system, and they can't be any more restrictive than what the federal rules mandate. So a question we commonly get, do my clients have to exhaust all their life savings to qualify for Medicaid? Well, the answer is simply no. And that's what we're here to do today and through the rest of our webinar series that we frequently publish, is we're going to show you the ways to accelerate their eligibility without spending down all their hard-earned assets. So there's ways to take somebody today who's in a nursing home spending down, they have assets, we can accelerate their eligibility. They do not have to be broke to be on Medicaid. There's ways that we can do this today and make this happen for your clients. So let's talk about the requirements. What are the requirements to qualify for Medicaid? Well, there's both non-financial and financial requirements. The non-financial requirements are that your client has to be a U.S. citizen or qualified alien, which we typically see. Age 65 or disabled, that's typical. If somebody's 65, they're automatically considered disabled. Or if they're disabled, say they're younger, they require a nursing home stay, they would also fall under that criteria. And they must be in a nursing home that has a Medicaid beds. So typically the non-financial requirements are pretty straightforward. It's the financial requirements where people have more questions, there's more confusion. So the financial requirements, they must have limited countable assets and limited income. So let's explore those two. So when we're talking about limited income, we're talking about income from all sources, whether it be pensions, Social Security, any sources. It must be less than the private pay rate of the nursing home. And according to the Genworth study in 2016, the private pay rate across the country is $6,844. And that varies quite a bit state to state. For example, New York, upstate New York could be $15,000 a month. In Alaska, it could be up to $20,000 a month. Whereas in Texas or Alabama, the cost can be much lower, say around $4,000 a month. So it really depends on your state, but this is the cost across the country, taking into consideration all the highs and lows. But still a very significant number in light of the fact of how many people will require this type of care in their future. So then when we're talking about Medicaid eligibility and assets, what are we talking about? Well, an individual, that's the person in the nursing home, can generally keep up to $2,000. And that varies a little bit by state, so you definitely want to check your state planning figures to figure out the exact number. But generally what we see, it's $2,000, that's the prevailing majority. When you have a husband and wife case and a community spouse, when we're talking about a community spouse, that's the person residing in the community, and then you have the institutionalized spouse, that's the person in the nursing home. So in this case, a community spouse can keep up to $120,900, which again depends on the state. There's also some states where there's a high-low, and then the community spouse is able to keep a number in between those, and there's a calculation they have to do to find that exact amount. Again, I recommend looking at the state resource pages on our website. You can find a little bit more information on that. So that brings us to the question is, what else can they keep? Well, there's things that are protected resources when you're doing Medicaid planning. So one of the protected resources is the primary residence. So individual or a couple are allowed to keep their primary residence. The issue when you come up with an individual plan is, unless they have the intent to return home, who's going to pay those bills for that home? So typically what we see in an individual case is they sell their primary residence and they use the funds then to spend down in other ways. But a husband and wife, they can have a residence typically of any value. There's some states that varies a little bit, but one residence, then they can have their personal property, which includes all the furnishings in a home that you would typically find in any standard home, their clothing, jewelry, all their personal property. Additionally, they're allowed to keep one motor vehicle, usually of any value, so you want to look at that as an option. And then they're allowed to have prepaid burial plans. So we always recommend that if they do not already have a plan, that they go out and get one, because this is a great way to spend down some of their assets, and it provides them with a solution once they do eventually pass away. So what's the number one reason that people don't immediately qualify for Medicaid? Well, it's pretty simple. They have too many assets. So they're above those asset limitations that we just discussed, whether it be money in their checking account, their savings account, CDs, maybe some stocks, some investments, previously purchased annuities that are now in payout mode, maybe a motor home, maybe a second home. All of these assets will prevent them from ever obtaining Medicaid if we don't do something with them. So what can be done with these excess assets? Well, what we refer to it as spending down. So you have excess countable assets. What we have to do is spend them down. So spending down can occur by paying nursing home bills, paying off the mortgage, credit cards, other bills, financial advisor bills. You can also purchase or improve those non-countable resources, such as the primary residence. So if the community spouse in a situation is in a home that's in maybe disrepair, you can go out and purchase a new home. As long as it's their primary residence and they have one home, you can make improvements to the existing home. You can change the roof, do different things to make their stay more comfortable. Additionally, the same thing with the car. You can go out, if the car is a later model or an older model, you can go out and purchase the new vehicle so they have safe transportation. Also, you can take care of household furnishings, get new furniture and various things. And also, again, you could purchase the prepaid burials that we always recommend that your clients have. So once your clients do all those things and they realize there's still money left over, what can be done with those assets, the cash assets? Well, what we're here to talk today about is converting those assets into a properly structured immediate annuity. So when we talk about a properly structured immediate annuity, we're talking about an annuity that works for Medicaid planning purposes. So does any immediate annuity work? Absolutely not. The typical annuity that you're going to find out there in the general market is not going to work for Medicaid planning. They simply do not have the key points that are required by the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005 to allow them to be utilized as a Medicaid planning tool. And we frequently see annuities that do not meet these requirements, and typically then we have to do something with them, which typically means selling them on the secondary market, getting them value, turning them into cash, which ends up being not the best result for the client. So what is a properly structured immediate annuity? So we're talking about a properly structured immediate annuity. We're talking about a Medicaid compliant annuity. That's what we refer to them as, that meets the requirements of the DRA. The requirements of the DRA, there's 5 of them. The first one is that the annuity has to be irrevocable. The typical annuity you're going to find out in the marketplace is irrevocable as to the payment amount and the duration. However, it's not going to meet the DRA requirements because the DRA requires that it be irrevocable to the payment amount, the duration, the parties, the owner, the annuitant, and the beneficiaries. So a typical annuity that you're going to find in the market will only meet a few of those points as far as being irrevocable. Non-assignable, this is where companies like J.G. Wentworth, you hear their jingle, get cash now. So a lot of these annuities, because you can change the ownership and the beneficiary of the annuity, they can be sold to J.G. Wentworth's, Peachtree Financials of the world for a cash sum. So the annuity has to be non-assignable, meaning that it has no cash value, it's irrevocable, so nobody will purchase it on the secondary market. It has no value. Next, it has to be actuarially sound. And this came about by way of Transmittal 64, which said that an annuitant must receive their investment amount and interest back within their Medicaid life expectancy. And states either use their own Medicaid table or they use a Social Security table. The term of the annuity must be equal to or shorter than or less than their Medicaid life expectancy. So, for example, if you have somebody who has a life expectancy of 100 months, the annuity cannot be 101 months. It would not be actuarially sound. It can be 100 months, or it could be 2 months, and it would still be considered actuarially sound. Next, the annuity has to make equal payments. And in the past, there was Medicaid would allow for balloon payments. That's where you receive a small payment. For example, $100,000, you receive $99 for months 1 through 99, and then the 100th payment would be $99,000. They've done away with that, so the payments have to come out. Typically, what we see is monthly. They have to be in the same amount for the duration of the annuity. And finally, the last requirement is that the state is required to be named as a beneficiary. If they have to be named as a primary beneficiary. The only exceptions to that rule are if there's a community spouse, that's the healthy spouse living at home, or if there's a minor or disabled child. So when should you consider using an MCA? Well, if your client is a resident of a Medicaid-approved nursing home, they're expected to remain at that facility indefinitely, they have exhausted all of their Medicare benefits, and they're self-paying, and they have countable assets. So you're not going to use an MCA if they're going to qualify automatically because they don't have excess countable assets. You're not going to jump into an MCA if your client is in a nursing home, but there's a potential that they could go home. You're going to want to wait out a few months and kind of get some clarity to that situation before you jump into a Medicaid compliant annuity. Because like I said, once you set up the annuity, it's irrevocable. You can't make any changes to it. So we want some clarity with the situation. We want to make sure that we kind of know who's on first, who's on second before we commit to the annuity. But so here, let's take a look at a case study here. We have Grace. So Grace, she's an 85-year-old widow residing in a Michigan nursing home. Grace suffers from dementia but is otherwise in good health. After the recent sale of her home, Grace has $200,000 in her savings account. Her monthly income is $1,200 from Social Security, and the nursing home Grace is in is charging $7,500 per month. So what if Grace does nothing? Well, she'll exhaust her entire life savings within 31 months, and we determine that by taking her assets, which are $200,000, and dividing that by the shortfall of $6,300 a month. She's short every month to privately pay for her nursing home. So that gives you 31 months. Grace is totally out of money. She would then qualify for Medicaid automatically. So is there anything that we could do to accelerate her eligibility? Well, let's take a look. Well, the solution here is a plan that we sell a lot of. It's one of our most popular plans. It's referred to as a gifting MCA plan. So this strategy is used when we have somebody who's in a nursing home and they have either normal or unknown longevity. So that means that they're not on their deathbed. They're not going to pass within the next 12 months, unless something radical were to happen. But typically it's somebody who would be there for more than a year. The average stay is approximately 2 years in a nursing home, so it's somewhat in that range. And Grace definitely meets that criteria. She has dementia, but her health is probably pretty good or unknown. So what's the goal of the gifting plan? Well, first we want to make Grace otherwise eligible, and you do that by getting her down to $2,000 or less. The Medicaid rules require that she become otherwise eligible before that penalty period that we'll discuss begins ticking. So what we want to do is we're going to have Grace make an immediate wealth transfer or a gift to her intended heirs. And then at the end of that gift is going to create a penalty period, a predetermined penalty period. And at the end of the penalty period, Grace is then going to begin receiving Medicaid benefits. So let's take a look at how that plan plays out. Okay, so we have Grace, her nursing home, like I said before, is charging $7,500 per month. We have Grace's monthly income at $1,200. That brings us to a shortfall of $6,300. So then we add that monthly shortfall to the divestment penalty divisor. And this is a state figure, again, you could find on our website, you could find in your state Medicaid manual. It's $8,018 for Michigan, but every state's going to be different. So you want to look at your one of our desk references or one of our resources. So that gives you a burn rate. The burn rate is a number essentially that it helps determine the gift amount, and it helps determine the amount used for the annuity. So that's the amount of cash that's being burned through every month with this plan. So we're going to take the spend down amount, which is $198,000, because here Grace retained $2,000 as her individual resource allowance. So we're going to take the spend down amount of $198,000, and we're going to divide that by the burn rate of $14,318, and that gives us 13.82. So this is going to be the term of the plan. But in order to avoid the edge of Medicaid eligibility, as we like to coin the term, we want to round that up to 14 months, and I'll show you how that works. So the 14 months is going to be the gift amount. So we're going to take the term of the plan, which is 14 months, we're going to multiply it by the state's Medicaid divisor, which is $8,018, and that equals an immediate gift amount of $112,252. So Grace here is going to immediately make this gift to her children. So by making this gift, we've created a 14-month penalty or divestment penalty period. So this is the amount of time once you make the Medicaid application, Medicaid office is going to look back at the previous 60 months of your finances, and they're going to see that you made a gift of $112,252. They're going to say, okay, based on the divisor amount, that's going to equal a 14-month gift or 14-month penalty period where you're not eligible to receive Medicaid benefits. So at the end of that 14 months, then you're able to begin receiving Medicaid benefits. So let's determine the annuity single premium now. So we had the spend down amount of $198,000. We subtracted the amount $112,252 that Grace gifted to her children, and that leaves us with $85,748, and that's the amount that we put into the Medicaid compliant annuity. And again, we have a term of 14 months, so that annuity over the term of those 14 months is going to pay out $6,147.79 with a total payout of $86,069.06. So how does that all work out? I guess first we're going to determine the shortfall here. So we have the nursing home cost of $7,500 per month. Then we have Grace's total monthly income of $7,347.79. And that total income is the annuity income, the amount she has from the annuity, which is $6,147.79. And then her monthly income, which was $1,200, just to confirm, $1,200 from Social Security. So that's her total monthly income is at $7,347.79. So each month during our 14-month plan, she has a shortfall of $152.21. So over the course of the plan, there's a total shortfall of $2,130.94. Okay, so once we determine that, we kind of see how the plan is going to work out. So we made the transfer, we made the gift of $112,000. Now we've purchased the annuity for $85,000 over 14 months. And now what we want to do is go apply for Medicaid to get the clock ticking on the gift. So you have to do it in this order, so you, like I said, you're now otherwise eligible after making the gift, purchasing the annuity, and now you apply for Medicaid. So you're otherwise eligible. Now the clock starts ticking on the gift. So here's how the timeline works. Again, like I said, you make the gift, purchase the annuity, apply for Medicaid. That starts the clock, and during those 14 months, months 1 through 14, we're going to be privately paying for the nursing home. And like I said before, Grace has $7,347.79. The nursing home's charging just a bit more at $7,500 a month. So we're going to almost be able to privately pay the full amount between Grace's Social Security and the payment from the annuity. So then after months 1 through 14, Grace will be immediately eligible for Medicaid in month 15. So what do we have here? We have a plan. We had Grace. You know, she was spending out her money. It would have been at approximately $6,300 a month. She was short, and what did? We came in. We gave her some certainty, and we gave her a certain result. So we immediately gifted $112,252 to her children, and with that money, Grace's children can cover that shortfall amount of $2,000 They can subsidize her care, get her massages, manicures, make her stay more comfortable. They can do all those things now that they have this amount. And again, she then at the end of that penalty period, which is predetermined, she begins receiving Medicaid benefits. So automatically in month 15, Medicaid is then picking up the tab of her nursing home stay. So all she will be paying is what we refer to as her copay, which is her $12,000 or $1,200 of Social Security, less her personal needs allowance, which in Michigan is $60 a month. So one thing to think about in this plan, if Grace doesn't live until month 15, she will not have really gained any economic benefit, because if she were to pass away, what we do with this type of plan is we're agreeing to privately pay for a specified amount of months or a specified time period. So if she were to pass away in, say, month 6 of the plan, she wouldn't have gained any economic benefit because she would have been privately paying. And on the flip side, this annuity lists the state as primary beneficiary, but because the state hasn't paid anything on her behalf, because we're privately paying, she wouldn't owe the state anything. So then the remainder of the annuity payments, or what's left in the annuity, would then go to the secondary beneficiaries, which would be the kids. So there would be no economic benefit, but there would also be no economic downside to going forward with this plan if she were to pass away. So let's take a look at the second most common type of plan that we come across, which is planning for a married couple. So here we have Bill and Joan, and we're going to kind of walk through what we see as one of the most standard planning techniques that we utilize. So what is the goal in a married couple case? Well, the goal is to obtain immediate Medicaid eligibility for the institutionalized spouse. Again, that's the spouse receiving the nursing home care services, and also then to provide the community spouse, the person that still living at home, with sufficient income and resources to maintain their lifestyle. There's a lot of rules that are set up that protect the community spouse to a certain degree to ensure that they're not left destitute, but there's ways to do planning where we can provide an even better result for the community spouse. So here we have Bill and Joan. Bill is 83 years old, and he recently entered a nursing home. His monthly income is $2,500 from Social Security and pension. Joan is his 82-year-old community spouse. Her monthly income is $1,100 from Social Security. Together they have a home, standard furniture, personal property, one car, and $250,000 of non-IRA bank accounts. Bill's monthly nursing home bill is $8,000. So again, what will the couple have if they do nothing? Well, if you take Bill's monthly income into account and what the nursing home is charging at $8,000 a month, they're gonna run out of money at 45 months. They're gonna burn through their $250,000 in assets. So that's a problem. And then the next problem is when Bill passes, Joan will be left with limited assets, once they burn through some of them, and only be left with the larger of the two Social Security checks. So she'll be left with nominal assets and likely nominal income because, Joan is used to living on the combined income of Bill and herself, which is $3,600, so she would only be left with the bigger of the two Social Security checks. So, she's at this point worried about her financial future. Well, we have a solution. Joan comes to your office and you guys set up the plan. First, what we're going to do is we're going to determine the spend down amount. So, like we talked about before, what is Joan allowed to keep? She's allowed to keep the home, she's allowed to keep her vehicle, furniture, all her personal property. Additionally, she's allowed to keep $120,900 as her community spouse resource allowance. This number varies by state. It can, like I said before, there's some states with a high-low, but in this case, for the example, it's $120,000, not $120,900. So Bill, as the institutionalized individual, he's allowed to keep his personal property and $2,000 as individual resource allowance. Okay, so then if you do the math here, we have their total assets of $250,000. We're subtracting Joan Cesra at $120,900 and Bill's individual resource allowance of $2,000. So that leaves us with a spend down amount of $127,100. This is the amount that we have to get rid of or do something with prior to qualifying Bill for Medicaid. So how do we eliminate the spend down? Like I said, the spend amount of $127,100, we can eliminate it very quickly. Here we're going to purchase a $10,000 funeral expense trust for Joan. We're going to do the same thing for Bill, a $10,000 funeral expense trust. So that brings us down to $107,100, and this is where the Medicaid compliant annuity comes into effect. We're going to purchase that for Joan as the community spouse. There's no requirement that says we have to purchase it for the institutionalized individual, and we'll show you why it's a better result. Always purchase it for the community spouse. So we take the single premium amount of $107,100, and in this instance, we're going to look at Joan's life expectancy. At 82 years old, her life expectancy is 8.31 years, or 99.72 months. In this instance, we're going to purchase her annuity for her full life expectancy at 99 months with a monthly payout of $1,109 per month and a total payout of $109,791. So once we purchase the annuity, it gets rid of that remaining spend down amount, and now we're looking at income. Joan's MIMNA amount, so this is the amount that she's entitled to per month to make sure that she's not left with little resources per income per month. This varies per state. In this instance, for ease, we're going to give her the maximum amount, which is $3,022.50. So we take her total income, which is $2,209, which is the amount is $1,100 from Social Security and $1,109 from the annuity. So we're going to less that from the MIMNA, which she's entitled to each month as her minimum amount, and that gives us an $813.50. So this is the amount that she's entitled to receive from Bill to get up to that MIMNA amount. So what we have here is Bill's income at $2,500, the shift from Bill's income, which is going to go over to Joan, of $813.50 per month to get her up to that MIMNA of $3,022.50. Additionally, we're going to subtract Bill's personal needs allowance of $60, and that gives us Bill's Medicaid copay. So now he's paying $1,626.50. So what are the economic results here? Well, Joan, like I said before, she has $3,022.50 per month to live on through months 1 through 99. She's receiving that each month. She's getting the shift from Bill as long as he remains in the nursing home. Additionally, Bill and Joan were expected to pay $8,000 a month for his care, but now Bill's only going to have to pay $1,626.50 per month. So that's a savings of $6,373.50 every month. So you can see how this is a no-brainer plan. We get Bill on Medicaid. We stop the bleeding of having to pay those huge bills every single month and depleting resources. So now the plan's kind of an autopilot where Bill and Joan are experiencing monthly savings. Joan is left with a reasonable amount of income to cover her costs out in the community. So it's a very beneficial result. So what are some of the advantages and considerations when we're looking at this plan? Well, first off, Bill was immediately eligible for Medicaid benefits. Unlike the individual plan where we're making a gift, purchasing the annuity, and then we're writing out a penalty period, here we're immediately getting eligibility. So we apply, and within that same month or the next following month we'll have Medicaid eligibility, so there's not a sit-out period like an individual plan. Again, Joan is able to keep the income that she requires to maintain her lifestyle. Originally, they had together as a couple $3,600. Once we get Joan her full MIMNA amount of $3,022.50, she's almost there. She's not quite there, but she's closer than she would have been if Bill was paying for the nursing home with his income, and she would have to live on her own income. So it's a much better result than what was happening while we were making payments in the nursing home. One consideration, though, if Joan were to pass away prior to the 99-month term of the annuity, because the state Medicaid department is listed as a primary beneficiary, there would be a payback on behalf of the the money that the state spent on behalf of Bill. Something to think about there is one benefit is you would get the Medicaid rate versus the private pay rate. And to get a more detailed calculation of how this would all work out, I recommend going back to some of our earlier webinars on community spouse planning. That'll give you the more detailed breakdown of what the repayment would be. But here we have another option, and this is something we see very commonly is instead of going with that full 99-month annuity term, Bill and Joan decide to shorten the term to something less. And what we say to planners is when we go shorter, we just want to ensure that it's not an abusive amount. We want to make the monthly income reasonable, something that's a rational amount that they can justify by either costs or potential upcoming costs. Say Joan might need some assisted or some at-home care from somebody to come in once Bill went to the nursing home. Maybe she needs a little bit of extra care. So we want to, by going shorter, we can create some more income for Joan, and we can get the money back to her more quickly to potentially avoid that state payback with the annuity. So taking a look here, instead of going with that 99-month term, what if we go with a 36-month annuity term? So here we have that same investment amount of $107,100 with instead of 99 months, we go with a period certain of 36 months. So the annuity will be paying out $3,002.52 per month, and for a total payout of $108.90.72. So Joan will have the $3,002.52 from the annuity, and she will also maintain her $1,200 a month from Social Security. So in this instance, that would eliminate the opportunity to get the shifting of income because you're over that MIMNA amount, which I previously stated was $3,022.50. So since you're over the MIMNA amount, Joan would not be entitled to any shift from Bill. So here Bill would just have his monthly income of $2,500 less his personal needs allowance of $60, and that would leave a copay to the nursing home of $2,440. So let's look at the economic results here. Joan then has a monthly income of $4,102.52, so she has more money coming to her each month. She has more money now than she had when Bill was at home at $3,600. So she's well taken care of. She's comfortable. Maybe she can pay for some of those extra expenses she might now have to occur that Bill's no longer in the home. But still, it's a good result because they were expected to pay $8,000 per month, and now they're only paying $2,240, which is Bill's income less his personal needs allowance. So they're still experiencing a monthly savings of $5,560. And why this is really important is, the state payback consideration. So at 99 months, Joan has to live that full 99-month term. If she were to pass away at any point during that annuity term, then the state would be owed payback. It doesn't matter what happens to Bill. If Bill were to pass away, it wouldn't have an effect. It wouldn't be what we refer to as a triggering event on the annuity. So we're more concerned with Joan because she's the owner annuitant. So she has to survive the full 99-month term of the annuity at 82 years of age. So a lot of practitioners don't feel that they don't want to risk that potential payback, so they go with something shorter. And in this case, a 36-month annuity seemed to kind of hit all the bases, gives her a reasonable amount of income, and it prevents the likelihood that she's going to predecease the full term of the annuity. And that seems to be where a lot of practitioners lean because it gives them a little bit more certainty, a little bit less variables out in the future, especially considering Joan might need different levels of care or whatever. So we see a shorter term annuity being put into place for a community spouse case such as this. So that concludes my beginners program. Definitely more information on our website. You can check out other additional webinars that we've touched on the topics that explore these things a little bit more in depth. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Deb. I'm going to take some questions. Deb?
Thank you, Tom. That was a great presentation. A couple of questions I have for you. Where can our state resources be found?
Like I alluded to earlier, go to our website at thecrouseagency.com. We have a state resource pages. We developed what we refer to as a desk reference that kind of has all the state resource figures, includes everything you need to put together a plan. Additionally, you can request a Crouse report from us that has all the state resources in the back. It's an annual publication we put out. You can call one of our advisors, which Deb, Connie of our office. They'll take care of you. They'll point you in the right direction. Also, always take a look at the state Medicaid manual if you get a chance.
Okay.
Next question.
When is the best time to utilize the Medicaid compliant annuity?
Like I talked about earlier in the presentation, you want to have some certainty as to the parties, and they're going to maintain a certain level of continuity. For example, if you have somebody who just entered a nursing home, but there's the potential they could return home, that's not likely the scenario you want to use an annuity. You want to wait until you know that that person is going to require care for the remainder of their life. They're going to be in the nursing home facility indefinitely. That's when you want to utilize the annuity. So you want to really you don't want to use it before they go into the nursing home. You want to wait until they're in the nursing home, they're spending down their assets, and there's certainty that they're going to remain in that facility. Next question, please.
Okay. What if the client has an IRA? How are these handled?
Well, that's a state-specific question. Some states treat IRAs as a accountable resource. That means they have to be spent down or turned into a Medicaid-compliant product like anything else, so they're treated just like a stock account would be treated. Whereas some states protect IRAs, so they don't have to be spent down. They're viewed as an excluded asset or a non-countable asset. There's a few ways to, if you live in a state that's accountable, you can do a trustee-to-trustee transfer, a direct rollover, a 60-day rollover to take that IRA and put it into what we refer to as a Medicaid-compliant IRA account, to tax-qualified annuity, which meets the Medicaid requirements. Next question.
Okay. What if the client has a limited longevity or a terminal illness?
Well, if you're dealing with a single client, like I said earlier, the gifting plan probably is not the best result. You're going to go life expectancy. So if someone were to pass in a short period of time, say, they have a diagnosis from their doctor that they're likely to pass within the next 12 months. Well, by stretching the annuity over their life expectancy, it does a few things. Once we get them on Medicaid right away, so we're not agreeing to privately pay, we're obtaining Medicaid benefits right away, and they're also getting the benefit of the Medicaid rate versus the private pay rate. So when they ultimately have to reimburse the state after they pass away, it's going to be at a much lower rate than what they would have to privately pay. So in that instance, you would go likely with a longer-term annuity that's stretched over their lifetime. And that's only in an instance where you have certainty or not near certainty that they're likely to pass within the next year. Otherwise, the gifting plan is going to provide the more certain result.
All right, I have 2 more questions. I think that's what we have time for today. If a client has an existing annuity that is not compliant with the DRA, what can be done with it?
Well, I want to push everyone to our webinar that we did on that topic not too long ago. If they have an annuity that's pre-existing, that doesn't meet the requirements of the DRA, again, the Medicaid department is going to treat that as an asset because it can be sold to companies like J.G. Wentworth. They can access that cash. It can be readily turned into cash. So what we recommend, we have 2 recommendations. We either recommend selling it intra-family, and that's after we put it through a valuation process to establish the fair market value. A family member can then go ahead and purchase it for at least that amount, what we determine as a fair market value. Or you can bring it to us. We'll put it on the secondary market and get you the best value for the annuity. We'll put the companies like the J.G. Wentworths, have them bid on that annuity and get you a cash payout right away, and we also will take a look at the annuity to potentially purchase.
Thank you, and this is our last question today. You want to let everybody know how they can work with the Crouse Agency?
Yeah, definitely give us a call if you have a case that meets these requirements. Send us an intake sheet, get it to either Connie or Deb. They'll take a look at it. They'll put together a complimentary plan. We charge nothing to take a look at a case. What we want to do, if you want to become an agent of ours, we'll get you contracted to get you selling these products. Once your client, if you guys agree to go forward with the plan, that's the only time we charge. So if you have any case facts or anything that you want to shoot by us, we're happy to take a look. We operate like a firehouse. You send us a case, we're on it that same day. There's no delays. We understand that Medicaid planning, time is of the essence, so you have to move very quickly, and we're conscious of that. We do this day in, day out. This is all we do is crisis planning. So we want to be your back office crisis planning experts. So bring us the case, give Deb or Connie a call. We're happy to work with you.
Thank you, Tom. And I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. If we did not get to your questions, which I do see a few that we didn't, we will follow up with you yet this week. Again, if you could take a moment to take our survey, we'd really appreciate it. We hope you can join us at the end of the month, actually it looks like the middle of the month, for our next webinar, Navigating Your First Fair Hearing, What You Need to Do to Be Successful, on April 11th. See you then.